So I've been called a tale spinner, a wordsmith in the promotions for this TED Talk. But I'm not spinning any tales today. I'm going to be presenting before you facts based in science and history. And I'm going to leave you to take a call for yourselves on what this all means. We all know this gentleman as Alexander the Great. Everyone's familiar with him. But did you know that there is absolutely no archaeological evidence to prove that Alexander the Great existed? That's not in your history books. Everything we know about this man comes from the writings by three historians who lived between 150 and 400 years after Alexander died: Strabo, Arrian, and Plutarch. But Alexander is not mythology. He is history. So I'm going to explore some unanswered questions from the Mahabharata, which I've been researching now for about 12 years. And I'm not going to give you answers, but I'm going to give you some thoughts, which I hope will challenge you to be curious about what could be and what is. Here's the first question. Did the Mahabharata actually happen? The events in the Mahabharata, which is not just the Kurukshetra war, that's just 8,800 shloks out of the 1 lakh shloks in the Mahabharata. But did all the events described there, did it happen? It's a very common question. The fantastic weapons we hear about in the Mahabharata, did they actually exist? And if they did, how did these people over 5,000 years ago have that kind of science and technology? And then the question that led me on my journey as a fiction writer: are there scientific explanations for some of the things that we read about in the Mahabharata? This is a big one which I'm actually currently researching. Were there giants in the time of the Mahabharata? We hear about the Devs and the Asurs and the Rakshasas, these enormous beings of gigantic stature. Were they real? Let's explore this. But I'm going to start by taking you on a tour of the world. We're going to talk about some unexplained mysteries from across the world and then come back to the Mahabharata. And I'm going to start with Egypt. The Great Pyramid is one of the most famous monuments in the world. It is 457 feet high as it stands today, the equivalent size of a 45-story building. We are told by history books that it was built in about 2550 BC by a pharaoh called Khufu, as a tomb for himself. Now, when the Great Pyramid was built, it was locked, and this is its original entrance, which was only discovered maybe about 50 or 60 years ago. It was concealed, hidden away by the wall of rock, which you can see is scattered around the entrance today. So no one could enter the pyramid after it was built. It was closed and sealed. In 800 AD, the governor of Cairo, a gentleman called Muhammad al-Mamun, he decided he wanted to go inside. Why? Because he believed if a pharaoh was great enough to build a 45-story tomb for himself, he must have a lot of treasure inside. So al-Mamun and his men tunneled into the Great Pyramid using what is today called the robber's entrance. Tourists enter the Great Pyramid today using this entrance. But to his great shock and disappointment, when they reached inside, they found absolutely nothing. The walls were bare, no inscriptions. Unlike all the Egyptian tombs you would discover, there were no inscriptions on the walls. There was no mummy, and there was no treasure. He must have been a very sad man. Now, you can see the lower hole is the robber's entrance. The upper one is the original entrance, so you can see what I'm talking about, a close-up of these. What's also very interesting about the Great Pyramid is the maze of passages and tunnels inside. And you can see, if this was built as a tomb, they'd have had one heck of a time carrying the pharaoh's body up these passages, because none of them are in a straight line. They're all at crazy angles. Let's look at some of the angles. Look at the Grand Gallery. Now, this has a ramp today, which you can see at the base of the photograph. This ramp enables us to climb it, but when it was explored about 150 years ago, there was no ramp, and you can see how difficult it is to walk by yourself. Forget about carrying a corpse with you. The tunnels, most of these tunnels that I showed you, the network of tunnels, most of them are about 2.5 to 3 feet in height, like this one over here and this one over here, which means you have to crawl on your hands and knees to get through them. Not a great job if you're carrying a pharaoh's mummy around. So the question really is, why? Why was this 45-story building built 5,000 years ago locked away with all these passages, 3 chambers, and interestingly, tunnels from the king's chamber that opened up to the sky, like this. This is where it opens up in the north face of the pyramid. And from the queen's chamber, there are 2 tunnels which were explored about 15 years ago. And this is a National Geographic capture where you can see the tunnels are blocked. So why build them? Unanswered. Lots of speculation, but I'm not into speculation today. The Sphinx is another great, it's a fabulous mystery. So we are told that the Sphinx was built by the pharaoh Khafre, who was Khufu's son, and therefore built about 2500 BC. And for a very long time, this was accepted history. You can see how big the Sphinx is by looking at the size of the human beings next to it. This is just the shoulder and the neck and the head of the Sphinx. It's an enormous structure. And here's another shot which shows you the size of the Sphinx. Now, in the 1990s, a professor of geology at Boston University, Dr. Robert Schoch, he came along on the scene and asked the Egyptologists a very interesting question. He said, how do you know that the Sphinx was built in 2500 BC? And the fascinating answer was, well, we actually don't know. We think it was built in 2500 BC because you cannot date stone. You date it, it would be millions of years old, right? So Robert Schoch, being a scientist, said, not good enough for me. I'm going to run some geological tests. And his tests shocked the world because what his tests showed were that the erosion you can see on the Sphinx and on the walls of the enclosure surrounding the Sphinx were caused by heavy rainfall. And we know for a fact it has not rained heavily in Egypt after about 5,000 or 6,000 BC, which means the Sphinx could not have been built in 2500 BC. It had to be older than 6,000 BC, probably even 8, 9, 10,000 BC, we don't know. But it is an old monument. And the question then is, who built it? We were all cavemen and cavewomen in those days, right? We were using stone tools. We didn't have the technology and the science to build a massive structure like this, yet somebody did. Let me take you now to Stonehenge in the United Kingdom. Now, I'd visited this as a tourist about 12 years ago, but only while I was researching for my last book did I actually spend 2 weeks researching this deeply on site. And I discovered something about this that blew my mind. 70-ton blocks of stone put upright, and 70-ton blocks of stones on top. The stones lying flat on top also are 70 tons. The first question is, in 2400 BC, which is the officially accepted date for this, how did they do it? How did they lift these stones 30 feet into the air and put them on top? And there's complex engineering involved here. This is called a mortise-tenon joint in carpentry, modern carpentry, but they obviously knew it. So each of the upright stone has these 2 projections called tenons. The mortise holes of stones on top fit onto them so it locks the stone in place. And if you look carefully, there's a tongue and groove joint like a jigsaw puzzle on the sides of the stones. So not only do you have to lift the stones, so one stone fits, that's great. The second stone has to fit the tenon. The mortise-tenon joint has to fit as well as the tongue and groove joint. And you're standing here, putting it 30 feet in the air with possibly only ropes to help you achieve this. In the 1950s, they reconstructed Stonehenge using cranes. But in 2400 BC, they did not have cranes. How did they do this? Then you can see the mortise holes. Here's a shot of one of the tenon projections. Here, if you look very carefully, you can see the tongue of a stone on the stone that is flat on top. Let me take you to Wales. This is a fascinating place. When I saw it again, it blew my mind because there are magical things that happen here, and I'll tell you just one of them. This is supposed to be a burial chamber at a place called Bryn Celyn. And the entrance of this chamber faces northeast. So every year, between December and April, the sun rises in the northeast. If you remember your geography, it rises in the northeast in winter in the northern hemisphere. It shines through this entrance and illuminates a stone pillar which is inside the chamber. Now, you'd say, no big deal, right? The interesting thing is that the stone chamber is where the blue line is. It is not in line with the entrance. So obviously, light from the sun is reflecting off the walls of the chamber and illuminating the pillar. And you can see it's reflective. It's quartz-lined rock. Here's the magic. I don't know if you can see, there are grooves cut into the rock. Here's a close-up. You can see it clearly now. So here's what happens. Every day, starting from December, the sun shines in through the passage and illuminates a different notch every day. It climbs from the base of the pillar in December to the top of the pillar in April. This, my friends, is a 5,000-year-old calendar. Just by looking at which notch is illuminated, you know the day of the year in winter, right, between December and April. Built in 3000 BC, we are told by the archaeologists. 5,000 years ago, how could they build a parabolic mirror, which is what the walls of the chambers are? How could they do something like this? It's amazing. Unanswered questions. Now, some very interesting theories were advanced about 20 years ago when I started researching this. One of the pioneers in this is a gentleman called Graham Hancock. And he and other people of his ilk used a lot of science to create a theory saying that there was an ancient global civilization, had advanced science and technology, and was washed out by a global flood 12,000 years ago. Interestingly, recent discoveries have actually provided fascinating evidence for this. So in 10,900 BC, we now know a comet hit the Earth. It's shattered into fragments and hit the Earth at different points, which is now marked by what's called the Younger Dryas boundary, and melted the ice cap. The ice age was anyway getting over. Sea levels rose, causing a global flood. Volcanoes erupted, ash filled the atmosphere. There was, for 1,300 years, temperatures dropped sharply, as you can see. I'll just show you. These animals in North America went extinct altogether. One of the biggest mysteries until this discovery was made about the comet hitting the Earth was why these animals all disappeared at the same time 12,000 years ago. This is a report from an ice core from the Greenland ice cap, which shows, you can see 15,000 years ago, there's a spike in temperature, the ice age is ending, and then suddenly the temperature plummets to what it was below what it was during the ice age. That is when the comet hit. 1,300 years later, the temperature returns to normal. And another fascinating discovery made in 2008, don't know if you've heard of this. This archaeological team working in Russia in a cave called Denisova discovered a tooth, a big tooth. The surface area of this tooth is about 2.5 times that of our teeth, a human tooth. So they thought this must belong to a large, now extinct animal, like some of the ones I just showed you. And they sent it for DNA testing to try and figure out who it belonged to. Imagine their shock when the DNA tests came back saying that this tooth belonged to a human being, a human species which we did not know existed until this tooth was found. Not Homo sapiens, which is what we are, Homo sapiens sapiens, but they had to give it a new name. They called it the Denisovans. And I'm going to share 3 amazing discoveries which you will find in the scientific reports about the Denisovans over the last 9 years. The first is that all the people living today in the geographical areas covered by the green line, which is quite substantive, all of us have Denisovan DNA. 2.4% of our DNA is Denisovan DNA. This is a fact. The second interesting thing was this bracelet. Now, the Denisovans lived about 30 to 40,000 years ago. This bracelet is about 30 to 40,000 years old. We believe it was made by the Denisovans. And I'm not going to dwell on the beauty of the bracelet, but focus on that small hole at the side of the bracelet, which is 1 millimeter in diameter. Very small, very fine. The scientists who ran physical tests on this hole say that it could have been made, and I quote from the report, it could have been made only using a high-speed drill. Otherwise, the stone would have shattered. A high-speed drill 30,000 years ago? This is also mind-blowing. Just like we have Denisovan DNA, the Denisovans have DNA belonging to another human species which we have not yet discovered. There are still mysteries out there waiting to be solved. There are still discoveries waiting to be made if we are curious enough to challenge our existing beliefs and look for the evidence. Science is opening up the way now. I'm going to now come back to the unanswered questions about the Mahabharata, and I hope I'm going to leave you with thoughts, not answers, but thoughts that will lead you to curiosity to learn more about this. Did the events described in the Mahabharata actually happen? There is absolutely no archaeological evidence to prove that the events of the Mahabharata happened. There is also no archaeological evidence to prove that Alexander the Great existed. Is it possible that the weapons described in the Mahabharata actually existed? Did they have the scientific knowledge to create those kind of weapons? Can there be a scientific basis for some of the things we've described in the Mahabharata? We can't say for sure. What we do know for sure is that 30 to 40,000 years ago, there were people who we didn't know about until now. There were people who had some kind of technology. We don't know what it was, but they did. We know that they had engineering techniques like this one and the one at Bryn Ketlithi to create complex buildings, some of which we cannot do today. We cannot build the Great Pyramid today if we wanted to. The Sushruta Samhita, written in 1000 BC, is a manual on brain surgery, and one of its techniques, called the flap technique of plastic surgery, is still in use today in the 21st century. A 3,000-year-old text. And I found this very interesting while researching this. The Sulba Sutras, written in the first millennium BC, first state what we now know as the Pythagoras Theorem. They used geometry, and the square root of 2 is defined. So let me very quickly show you. In those days, in the Vedic age, you had altars. We didn't have temples. We had altars. This is one example. 4 levels, A, B, C, D. Each level had a different type of brick, hence A, B, C, D. 196 bricks. Could not have been made without the use of geometry. This is the Bodhyana Sulba Sutra's definition of the Pythagoras Theorem. It is there. And the square root of 2 is pretty close to our modern value. Were they really giants in the Mahabharata? Well, the Denisovans must have been a pretty big people. I'm not saying they're the people in the Mahabharata, but it's interesting. So I'm going to end over here, and like I said, I hope I've given you enough to challenge your thoughts and look for more. Thank you.